Hi everyone, very welcome to yet another episode of Captain Speaking. As always, my name is Peter Hörnfeldt and...
I am Ben Watts.
Perfect. So, Ben, another week has passed.
Another week. It goes fast. It
I
goes
know.
fast.
I know. Do you notice that as well? As you get older, that it just seems like the weeks are just like swishing by?
Is it older or busier? I don't know. But either way.
It is older. And I actually looked into this. It's pretty interesting, actually, because everyone says the same, right? And I have actually come across only one person in my life who says that it's the other way around. That he actually feels that it is going slower. Right? It's a friend I've met here in Andorra, where I moved now. Fahim, he's a fantastic man, and I was on a road trip with him not too long ago. And he said, as the first person ever, that he felt that the time was slowing down. And I looked into that and I talked to him, like, why do you think that? And he said, it's because I'm doing more of the things that I like and I'm doing different things all the time.
Interesting.
And when I've been looking up on this, because I'm a curious person, so I do, what the scientists are saying is that the older you get, the more you tend to rely on routines. So the more you tend to do things the same way, you have the same type of breakfast in the same chair, you get up at the same time, you walk to work, you do other things. And since we have a limited memory capacity, what happens then is that the memory just prioritizes when something that it can learn from pops up. And none of your routines fits that bill.
Makes sense.
You're just going to be doing what you've been doing so far, and that's it. So that's why in your memory you kind of just like things. Have you seen that movie, the guy where I think, is it Ben Stiller that has the remote control?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It is essentially that the remote control just like fast forward of the things that you do on autopilot, and you never remember it. So that would explain why he said, listen, I'm one day I am out with a motorcycle, another day I go skiing, another day I do this, and I don't have a schedule, so I just do what I think I want to do on each and every day, and then it feels like the time slows down.
Interesting. Because that goes against the saying, like, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, true.
It's interesting.
But I think that's the thing. I think it times does fly when you're having fun. But when you look back at it, if you've had a lot of fun, different types of fun during a week, and you look back at it, you think like, oh, this was a long week. I've done a lot of things. But if you come to the Friday, like now when we're recording, this is Friday, and you look back at the week, and in my case, for example, I have been just producing, because we're creating a lot of videos and stuff now for July. I can't even, I don't even know where the week started.
No. I can definitely identify with that. Yeah, it's been a busy week. It's been busy. I mean, I suppose the beauty of the flying is that the weeks are often, there's very little routine in that sense. Week before last, I was flying a week. This week, I've just had mainly sim, actually. I've done mainly sim, bit of instructing, bit of examining. Had a standby as well, which it's one of those standby. Our standby is a duty where it's a working day, but you're at home and you could get called in for any kind of job, sim, flying. From the 12 hours, so 4 a.m. till 4 p.m, I was on standby, and you kind of dread the phone call at 4 a.m. and like, get here as quick as you can. You know, you got an hour to get there, like scramble. And it was one of those ones, and it was like, oh no. So you have an hour, and you think maybe an hour is quite a long time, but when you think, you've got to get dressed, you've got to go try and get through the pre-flight prep, at least kind of look at the flight plans, weather, no tabs, get to the airport, go through security, get to the aircraft. It's not long. You've got to really go.
But to be honest, it's an hour to get to the airport, and then you should have 45 minutes to prepare for the flight as well. So, But sure. I mean, I remember when I started. As you're a cadet, you look at you got a standby, and like back then, all you wanted to do was fly.
Yeah.
So I remember I had friends. I mean, I never did this. I always slept, and if they didn't call, I kept sleeping. But I had friends who would set their alarm clock to when their standby started, got up, showered, and put their uniform on, and just sat waiting.
I know. I never did that either, but I know people. I've flown with FOs that have done that as well. And
I wondered, it would be interesting. Like you should tell them, okay, note down when you stop doing this, because I can 100% guarantee that you will stop doing it, and likely within the first couple of months to half a year before you stop. Because You appreciate sleeping.
You
Sleeping is
do.
something you want to
Sleep is
do.
precious.
Yep, it's especially if you're working earlys,
Mhm.
because that's the thing. I mean, no matter, I don't know. I guess there are people who can get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and be, fit for fight. But I have never.
No.
And you get to bed when you get to bed. I mean, I remember I forced myself to go to bed at, 8:30
Yeah.
in the evening, and actually managed to get to sleep at around 9. But most people, they can't. They will go to bed and they will fall asleep at 11 o'clock no matter what, and then
Yeah.
you're up at 4. So
Yeah.
then you have your 5 hours of sleep, which is 3 hours less than what you should have
Yeah.
normally.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. But yeah, got called off and did the old dash to the airport. It was actually a nice day. Just Sardinia and back, and then 2 sectors, no training. So it's actually a pretty nice day in all fairness.
They're
But
spoiling you. You're
I
training way
know,
too little.
I know. It's we're just taking the bit of downtime while we can. I think it's going to ramp up again in the not too distant future.
Yeah, because Boeing is doing well now.
Yeah.
They've started to ramp up their production. Obviously, they can't go beyond, what is it, 38
Yep.
per month. But they have the capacity now. So
Yeah.
I think that you're just waiting for FAA approval to start ramping out and pushing out more. And then obviously that is the reason why your airline is kind of slowing down a little bit, because they were expecting to get more MAX aircraft than what Boeing can actually produce.
Exactly. So yeah, we're just taking the downtime from training while we can. So it's lovely to just go out and do some flying. It's nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's good.
Listen, we are soon about to start talking about the first big story of today. But before we get there, we did put a question out in the previous episode about turbulence, where you basically asked if it would be a good idea to tell the passengers. Do the passengers want to know that we are expecting turbulence, or should it just come as a not so nice surprise? And we did get a pretty clear answer to that in the comments.
Yeah. It was a resounding yes, please. Let us know. Let us know.
And that kind of makes sense. I mean, I think none of us actually said that we wouldn't say anything, but the question was whether or not we should really explain that on this flight you can expect to have moderate turbulence throughout most of the flight, or whether you should just say something along that there might be some turbulence here. Because not saying anything and just having it come as a surprise, obviously that's going to scare people even more, because it sounds like we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, true. Yeah, no, so it's great. So thank you for all the responses. It's it really helps us plan our day. So
I mean, it is wonderful to have this type of a platform and to have all of these people that obviously love talking about aviation and thinking about aviation and actually interacting with us, because it's powerful. Like we can get insights to how our passengers and also our fellow colleagues that are listening to this actually think, which is lovely.
Yeah, it's amazing. So more of the same, please. Yeah.
And we're the first thing that I want to talk about, which was actually your idea, is there's been quite a few emergency descents lately. So I want to talk about the emergency in emergency descents, why they happen and stuff like that. And we are going to do that just after this first break. Breaking news can happen at any time, but what if something would block you from actually accessing them? Geo restrictions are a sad reality for most of us, but that's where today's sponsor, NordVPN, comes in. When Ben and I put these podcasts together, we often need to research the stories that we will talk about, and that's when we sometimes run into these kind of geo restrictions. But with NordVPN, we can then move virtually to almost anywhere in the world, and that usually solves that problem. But Nord is not just about us gaining access. It's also about stopping bad actors from getting access to us, which is something that Ben experienced himself when he was using Wi-Fi at a hotel in the US a while back. And that's actually what led him to get Nord in the first place. You see, NordVPN now features powerful cybersecurity tools, like their excellent Threat Protection Pro, which, when you activate it, will immediately start blocking suspicious websites, phishing attempts, malware trackers, and all of those annoying ads. And you don't even need to be connected to a VPN for it to work. Right now, you will get 4 extra months for free when you sign up for the 2-year deal using this QR code or by going to nordvpn.com/captain. That's nordvpn.com/captain. We would really appreciate if you use that link, as sponsors like Nord are what enables us to make this podcast in the first place, since it's still relatively small. Thank you, Nord. Now let's continue. Okay, welcome back. So, like I mentioned before, we want to talk a little bit about emergency descents. And why is that, Ben?
Yeah, I noticed on the news recently that there's been a number of newsworthy headlines where aircraft, you see that the classic media headline, aircraft plunges 20,000 feet in an emergency descent. And every time I see that, it makes me just kind of wince a little bit, because you and I know that that's just not true in the way that it's described. But there's been there was a Spring Airlines Japan flight, IJ004, which happened literally a couple of days ago from when we're recording this. And there's passengers reported that the aircraft plunged from 36,000 feet to 10,000 feet, which makes a lot of sense. But they also said that it took 10 minutes to do that, which, so, just to put, and there's been others. We've got the Ethiopian's 787, which obviously made the news, being a 787 with what happened with Air India. That was going from Ethiopia to Mumbai. And again, that initiated an emergency descent because of a loss of cabin pressure. There was an Aero Italia 737 over from Milan to Cagliari to Milan. It was just north of Olbia. Had a similar thing. And it's an interesting topic. It's one of those things that I think is really widely misunderstood. I remember I put a reel out years ago on my social media, and it's quite a controversial. It turned out to be quite a controversial reel. It got a lot of comments on that, and I put basically that most of you watching this, if you've flown anyway regularly or done any kind of flying more than a few times, I would hazard a guess that you have most likely experienced something very, very similar to an emergency descent. Now, I know that might raise a few eyebrows, but do you want to go, Peter? Do you want to go into your experience on this and why would someone?
Yeah, so I understand what you mean, right? If we just do the simple math here, if you're at 36,000 feet and you descend to 10,000 feet, you've dropped 26,000 feet. If you do that in 10 minutes, it means that you're descending with 2,600 feet per minute. When we do a normal descent, everyday descent, we descend with maybe 2,000 feet per minute. Sometimes 3,000 feet per minute. I've done regular descents as high as 5,000 feet per minute when I've had a very long descent clearance and I've been high on profile.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not plunging towards the floor. It is a controlled maneuver. Now, there is certain parts that we do to expedite that descent, which, for example, selecting our spoilers, so our speed breaks up. And at high speeds, which it can be if we increase the speed, which we should be in case we don't expect any structural integrity problems with the aircraft, you will feel vibrations. You will hear the noise go up from the wind rushing over, and you'll feel vibrations. Now that, of course, combined with seeing that the rubber jungle is dropping down, as in the oxygen masks, that's going to become probably a traumatic thing. But you're absolutely right. If it weren't for the rubber jungle falling down, you probably wouldn't even think about it.
No. And remember, an emergency descent, people always associate a lack of pressurization, which we'll go into maybe why we would do these, with an emergency descent. But they don't have to be. We can do emergency descents for other reasons. We have to suddenly get down in a hurry if there was like a severe, like maybe a fire on board or something like that. But an emergency descent is just that. It's just a way to lose height or altitude as quickly as possible. And as Peter said, we do that by trading the height that we have into airspeed. So we're trading our potential energy into kinetic energy by increasing our speed, closing the thrust. So the aircraft has to dive lower the nose to increase its airspeed, which increases the rate of descent. But we do that relatively regularly. I mean, air traffic control might keep us high. So we want to descend, but because there's traffic passing below us, we can't descend yet. So we'll have to remain at a certain level when we don't want to. It happens all the time. It's part of when we train cadets, what you have to do. So we'll just generally maybe slow down a little bit to give ourselves some energy in hand. And once we get our descent clearance, if it's a big descent clearance, we just wind the speed up. The aircraft will start pitching down to increase the airspeed. We'll put the speed brakes out. And that's exactly what we do if we have an emergency descent. Yeah, there's no real difference. And
from a maneuver point of view, it's really not that much of a deal. The key actually is not to be in a hurry when you do it, because that's when you miss things. But now the two things obviously that stands out here. you mentioned several incidents. We humans have a tendency to try to find patterns where there are none. Like that's part of the reason why we survived being in the jungle and then jumping down from the trees was that we could start to see patterns of where a saber-toothed tiger might be in the jungle, right? Because we'd seen saber-toothed tiger eating a few of our friends before. So we can kind of see, like, going close to that little piece of forest over there is a bad idea. So when you see a pattern of, for example, 2 or 3 emergency descents happening over a relatively short period of time, you might think, what's up? There's a pattern here. There's more emergency descents than normal. Something is up. Now, the simple answer to that is twofold. There's a much higher focus on flight safety after the Air India accident. So the newspapers, the press knows that anything that is aviation related that looks dangerous is going to sell newspapers and clicks. So they use that. That's number one. Number two is that we are now in fully on summer season in the northern hemisphere, which means that there are a lot more flights going on. And when there's a lot more flying going on, there's also a lot more incidents happening.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the answer. So it doesn't mean that all of a sudden there's more of these happening. But you talked about pressurization before, so maybe we should go into a little bit why we do an emergency descent.
Yeah. So when we're flying, we pressurize the cabin. It's a pressurized cylinder effectively, and that's so that we can breathe up at high altitude. So even though we are flying at, say, 40,000 feet above the ground where we just couldn't survive, the aircraft is having air blown into it. Only a little bit is let out, so it's pressurized. So the cabin altitude, the altitude that we're experiencing in the cabin might be between 6,000 and 8,000 feet. That's how it feels for us. And we're monitoring that. The aircraft automatically maintains that, and we'll look. But our job is to check that the aircraft is doing it correctly. And there's a couple of different ways that could be negatively affected. One of them could be what we call rapid depressurization, something like we saw with the Alaska flight where the door blew off. You literally, it's like you've got a Coke can that you've shaken up, and suddenly you put a great big hole in it. It's just rapidly depressurizes. It's not nice. There's another one which is more of a gradual depressurization, which could be the result of maybe a seal on a door not working properly, and the air is gradually seeping out. And the way that will show itself to us in the flight deck is the altitude in the cabin just gradually increasing. You'd feel the physical effects. You'd feel your ears starting to pop, which you wouldn't expect if you're in the cruise, for example. So we would probably spot it very, very quickly. But our job, either way, if we depressurize the cabin, survival now becomes the main priority, because we, as humans, we cannot survive. And we can talk about what we call times of useful consciousness, which is something we talk about, don't we, Peter, when we're training. And let's say if we're up at 40,000 feet, if we had a depressurization at 40,000 feet, which is not unusual, the flying at 40,000 feet is not unusual, we'd have about 15 to 20 seconds of time of useful consciousness. That's how much time we have while our brains are still working before we get starved of oxygen and we get hypoxic, which is when we,
And this is not, it's not super obvious, right? Because most people think like, well, I can hold my breath for much longer than 14 seconds. You know, why do I suddenly become hypoxic up there in just 10 to 15 seconds? And it's just that you're like, when you hold your breath, you're actually still taking up oxygen in your lungs. You know, the air that you pulled in is still being absorbed. But at those pressures, at those low pressures, the air is literally sucked out of your lungs.
Yes.
Right. You that's what will happen. And the lungs are not able to absorb oxygen. So whatever oxygen is in your blood is going to be used up very, very quickly. And what happens then, and the reason we say that it's useful consciousness, time of useful consciousness, is because you do not fall unconscious immediately, but you stop being able to control what you can and cannot do. So you stop making sense. You won't be able to reason. You won't be able to, you might just start laughing because you think it's funny, because it's hypoxia will be very similar to being drunk in the beginning. And then you will lose consciousness. And the problem there, obviously, is that you need to use those seconds to stop whatever is happening to you from continuing to happen. This is why when the pressure in the cabin drops to a cabin altitude that is below 10,000 feet, that is above 10,000 feet.
Yeah.
We will get our warning. there will be a warning in the cockpit saying that beep, 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 basically saying now there's something up with the cabin altitude. So we can have a look up and look at our altitude indicator that we have for the cabin to see what it says. Above 13,000 feet, as in if it continues to rise and it rises above 13,000 feet, then the oxygen masks will drop in the case of the 737.
You're 14, yeah.
That's 14,000.
Yeah.
Good. You see, I'm been away for too long. And you remember when you're sitting and you're listening to the cabin crew and they explain, in the unlikely event of a loss of cabin pressure, you will have to put your oxygen mask on. They always say that you have to put your own oxygen mask on first and then help others.
Correct.
What's the reason for that?
Yes, it's super counterintuitive, particularly if you're like a parent. Your natural instinct will be to protect your children. But in order to protect your children, you have to be working. You have to be fully able. So get your own mask on first. You're going to now make sure that you're not being affected. You're not going to go hypoxic. And now you can look after your children. It will take you all of a few seconds to get an oxygen mask on. And now you can focus on your children. So yeah, look after yourself first, as counterintuitive as that sounds, and then you can help others. But have you seen these YouTube videos of the military where they put them in these pressure chambers and they'll reduce the pressure in there, and they get given simple math tasks to do, like 2 + 7, 4 × 4, and as they gradually increase the altitude in the cabin pressure, the barometric chamber, these simple tasks become impossible. Yeah. These are top military professionals, and they can't do 2 + 7. They start giggling like school kids. Yeah. That's the danger.
Yeah.
And it's so insidious. That's the danger, is it gradually starts to creep in. So when you're starting to get a hypoxic, you're in a point where actually you don't care you're hypoxic because your capacity is going, and it's fun. You giggle, you're laughing,
You might be looking at your kid and realizing that something is wrong, but not caring about it, literally. So you have to stop that. Like you have to stop it in its track. Yeah. And getting pure oxygen in is the way to do that. Like these oxygen generators that we have on the 737, I think they actually have oxygen bottles on the 787.
They do.
But we have oxygen generators on the 737. That means that's why it also says that you need to pull the mask down properly, hard, because there's actually a mechanism up there that when you pull the mask down, it will start the generation process, which is a chemical generation process. This is also why you might, or you definitely will smell burning when this happens, because these oxygen generators get really hot. So you might smell burning plastic. It's not going to catch fire, but you'll definitely feel the smell. You need to get that oxygen in, because full, pure oxygen is going to, whatever little lung capacity that you still have left with that pressure, is going to be enough for you to survive and to keep yourself, conscious and useful consciousness.
Yes.
Until we get you down, right?
Correct.
This is where the plunging comes in. So we up in the cockpit is pretty interesting, because we train this on fairly regularly in our recurrent simulator sessions. This is something that we need to know how to do by heart. So it forms part of memory items.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to do this by heart. And the first thing we hear when we hear that beep, beep, beep warning, what is that?
That's telling you that our cabin altitude is now unsafe. We're now above 10,000 feet. And it becomes, and as Peter said, it's instinctive. And we could do it in zero visibility, because obviously when you depressurize, any air can condense, any moisture condenses out and forms like a fog in the cabin. So don't be surprised if you ever saw it. It would look like smoke, which could increase the panic, but it's basically just the moisture coming out of the air. So yeah, once we get that, we go straight into our actions. Everything stops. So your headset comes off. And we train this to be done as methodically as possible. We want to be very efficient, but we don't want this panic. So it's headset off. We reach down and we have our crew oxygen that we kind of pull out, and it's got a self-inflating kind of mask that goes around your head. You put it over your head. You can do it one-handed. You let go, and the mask will then just contract around your head. Headset goes back on, and you're going to establish comms. So you're both doing this simultaneously. Now we need to make sure we can talk through our mask, and you sound a bit like Darth Vader, but we'll kind of talk to each other. Peter, can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear you. So you've established comms. We're now safe, because if we're not safe, the airplane's doomed. So we've got to get ourselves safe. And then we're going to go into understanding what the problem is, which we will know is a rapid or a depressurization. And we will go into what we call our rapid depressurization memory items, which will involve us taking manual control of the pressurization because it's automatically done normally, and trying to close what we call the outflow valve. This is a valve at the back of the aircraft that opens and closes that decides how much air comes out of the cabin. So we will just try and close that, and that will try and keep as much air in the cabin as possible.
Yeah, because
It might work.
the vast majority of issues has to do with the pressurization system itself.
Yeah,
Something has gone wrong, right? The
Yeah.
automatic controller has decided that for whatever reason it's opening the outflow valve, which is literally like opening a door, and just lets out too much pressure. The altitude goes up, and we have now hopefully managed to stop it by pressurization selected to manual, outflow valve close, and monitor the situation. Now, it's super important to point out that basically we have 3 stages here. First is the survival stage, which is what Ben just explained. You get your oxygen mask on, and then you establish communication, right? So that now you're surviving. The second is to try to deal with the problem, because we don't really want to do an emergency descent if we can avoid it. Not because the actual maneuver in itself is any dangerous, but because this is an unannounced descent, and there might be traffic around us, there might be someone below us. You know, there's a lot of unnecessary risks that we want to try to avoid. And if we can fix the problem by just closing the outflow valve and manually regulate it, great. There's no need for an emergency descent then.
Yeah,
But,
correct.
but if I'm the first officer, because normally, at least in my airline, the roles divide here. So once the masks are on, the captain becomes pilot flying and the first officer becomes pilot monitoring. And the pilot monitoring in this case does the memory items trying to close the outflow valve.
Yeah.
And if we then decide, both of us, no, it's not working, the cabin altitude is still at this point maybe up at our cruising altitude, 37,000 feet or whatever, we decide that no, this is not working. Then the next step becomes the emergency descent.
Yeah, and one of the things we train when we're looking is making sure they understand that how a cabin is controllable. What does that look like? Because even though the altitude could still be very high in the cabin, if it's decreasing gently, gradually, are your ears changing the way they're popping and so on? We might regain control, albeit gradually. But either way, if we decide that it's uncontrollable, we're then going to go into the next procedure, which is the emergency descent. Again, that's split between pilot flying and pilot monitoring. So the pilot flying, the captain now would announce the emergency descent.
Super
We often
important.
it's important that we have the automatic one now, the PRAM, or the automatic emergency descent. But we'll also do that ourselves. So we will just go over the PA system with our mic, with our mask on, and we will say emergency descent, emergency descent, emergency descent. That informs the cabin. I will then, as a captain, select the lowest altitude I can down to 10,000 feet, ideally a bit below. I'd always try and go to 9 if I can to give me a bit of a margin. But we've got to think about terrain. We've got to think about how low can we go. And one of the things I always train Command Upgrade students is when we're transitioning over terrain, like the Alps, Pyrenees, is have a look at, if you lost the cabin now, where would you go? Would you turn left? Would you turn right? Would you go straight ahead? Because you could have Mont Blanc out on your left at 18,000 feet, or you could have something much lower on your right. So you know which way you're going to turn. So I always encourage them not just to sit back with a coffee when they're transiting over terrain, but have a think about where you'd go if this were to happen, and have a plan in place, ready to go. I liken it to like a ship's captain knowing where the shallow water is. You've got to know where the shallow water is as a ship's captain. We've got to know where the high terrain is as a pilot. So if it does to happen, we're already thinking about it. It's a bit like in a light aircraft when you're looking for a field, aren't you? You're always single engine aircraft, always thinking about an engine failure. Where am I going to go? Always on your mind. So if it does happen, you're kind of ready. Similar thing for me, and I always try and advocate that with Command Upgrade students. So we select the lowest altitude we can, and then we're going to do what we just said. We're going to do this plunge where I'm going to select that 10,000 feet. I'll select the highest speed that I can. If we think the aircraft is damaged, if we felt like a lot of vibration, we would limit that speed to try and prevent any kind of other further structural damage, because higher speed equals higher air loads. Maybe we get more damage. But if the aircraft didn't show any signs of damage, we would wind the speed up to our maximum speed possible. That's going to allow the aircraft to pitch down. We'll close the thrust levers. Speed brakes come out, which raise the spoilers on the wing. That increases the drag, which means the aircraft has to lower the nose even more to maintain that speed, which increases the rate of descent. and get us. We used to turn, didn't we? We used to turn
Yeah.
off the airway, but that hasn't recently changed, and we don't do that anymore. They say navigate as appropriate. So if we can use our situation awareness, we can use TCAS, we can look at is there traffic around, and we can just go straight ahead. We don't really fly on airways anymore, do we? We're kind of going direct everywhere. So
Almost always, yeah.
yeah,
And that makes sense. Now, it's interesting when it comes to the actual descent and we put maximum speed. This is something I don't think people realize is that obviously at our higher cruise levels, we fly on the Mach number.
yeah,
So we fly on Mach 0.79, so that's 79% of the speed of sound, more or less. Or exactly, actually. And if you, when we initiate the descent, if we descend, say that, okay, we are going to descend at our maximum speed, that's 0.81 on the 737, 0.82 you can select.
yeah.
But that also means that as you go, that's an indicated airspeed of about 207, 280 knots or
Depending on how
something.
high, yeah, depending on how high
Something
you are.
in that
Yeah.
area. But as you descend, that indicated airspeed will be higher and higher because the speed of sound effectively like will be quicker as you
Yeah.
go down and the temperature rises. So that means that if you're descending with Mach 0.81, you will increase the nose down attitude all the time. Right, so initially the descent rate is not going to be very high at all. It's going to be 1,500 feet per minute or something like that. But as you go lower, you can go to higher indicated airspeed, and the nose will just keep decreasing more and more until we get to around 26,000 feet or so, where we tend to switch over to indicated airspeed, and our maximum indicated airspeed is 340 knots. So you'd put it at 335 or something, and then you'll notice that it doesn't pitch down anymore. It kind of like stops there, and the descent rate will effectively become lesser again.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these kind of things that we have to keep track of as well, because obviously what we don't want to do is to lose control of the aircraft.
No.
So we are still up there. We're still taking these kind of decisions and monitoring our instruments and making sure that we are staying within the parameters of what's allowed with the aircraft. But anyway, so as we're descending now, you are captain, so you have initiated this descent. You're using your speed brakes and your speed, everything that. First officer is doing all of the other things. So going up over the overhead panel, for example, making sure that the automatic dropping of the oxygen masks has happened. That happens automatically. So it's just a matter of verifying that the passenger oxygen is on. If not, you can drop them manually. You go down, you make sure that the fasten belt sign is on. Also, that comes automatically. So it's just a matter of just switching it on. But this is connected to the cabin altitude warning. It will come on automatically when a high cabin altitude is sensed. Then you continue down. We normally select the engine start switches to continue. So make sure that normally when we're flying at altitude, the start switches are off because the ignition is self-containing. Right, the flame inside of our burn chambers in the jet engines burns of its own. Right? It just needs fuel to continue burning. But if we are under certain circumstances like heavy rain, turbulence, and in this case, we switch them to continuous, which means that the igniters keep igniting. So to avoid a potential flame out.
Yeah.
Then we switch on all of the lights, external lights, which is important because now we want to be as visible as possible to anyone outside. So while the landing lights, for example, and retractable landing lights, they are turned off above 10,000 feet generally. Now we switch them on so that any traffic can see that there's a big, honking 737 that's coming down quickly here. Yeah. And then you continue the scan down, verifying obviously that the captain has done all that he or she should do. Continue down, select 7700, which is the emergency code on the transponder, to make sure that all of the traffic around us, but especially the air traffic control in this case, can see that this is an emergency traffic now descending, and that ADSB is connected, so it's on altitude reporting, for example. So, once again, you have the pilot flying, making sure the aircraft is flying, and pilot monitoring, verifying that all of the other things are being done. Now, I understand why, when you read reports in the newspapers, passengers were terrified. Aircraft was plunging down, because if you combine all of these factors, you combine the potential boom hiss. If there's let's say that there is the alpha valve suddenly opens, you're going to definitely just feel it. The air will rush towards wherever
Yeah.
it's going, wherever the hole is. You get what you mentioned, which is the condensation of water vapor into fog.
Mm.
The rubber jungle drops down and people start activating the masks to start smelling burnt.
Yeah.
The aircraft pitches down and you hear over the PA, emergency, 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 which is the only thing you'll hear. You will not hear the sound. You'll just hear emergency, emergency, emergency.
Yeah.
Like if you combine all of these things,
Yeah.
I completely and utterly understand how it is terrifying.
Absolutely.
But be aware that this is all part of a very, very choreographed procedure that we've been practicing. If you're in we've been flying for 20 years, hundreds of times. We've done. I have never done one in reality. Have you?
No. Nope. Never done an emergency. I had a few pressurization problems where we had to get down, but never done an emergency descent before.
No. So
It's super
they're
rare.
exceedingly rare. But of course, in a global fleet of thousands, tens of thousands of aircraft flying every day, they're going to have the odd one happening now and then. Now, as we're descending, what else do we do as we're descending down?
So we will we will tell air traffic, get a mayday call out to let them know, as well as set the code. And now, once we've done this work, the workload massively drops for us now. It's a matter of monitoring the aircraft, and we now action our non-normal checklist. So in the 7.3, we actually have a QRH, which I've got, for example, just here. We would we would go through, we would read it. And that ensures that we've not missed anything. It covers everything that Pet has just described. And we'll just check it, check by check by check, with our masks on while we're going down, just to make sure we've not missed anything. And then there's additional bits in there as well that we will then continue to do. And then we're just monitoring the aircraft. We're just now sitting there waiting to get down to 10,000 feet or below.
Yep.
And it's the workload is done.
Yeah, the first officer is the one who's pilot monitoring in this case, so he or she the one that reading the non-normal checklist. We also are the ones that are calling air traffic control. So Mayday, 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 Butter 001, descending 10,000 feet, emergency descent.
Yeah,
that's it. Give information to they see it on the transponder. They now have heard it as an emergency call, but we always aviate, navigate, communicate. So this is going to be the last step. And then I will call out every 10,000 feet descending. So 30,000 feet, 20,000 feet. And the next thing that's going to happen, generally speaking, when we've seen this in the sim, the QRH checklist is being read somewhere around 25,000 feet and down, depending on what altitude we started at. But the first 10,000 feet is going to be just getting all of this done. And then it's going to be checklist reading. But the checklist will then be ready up until the point where we finish the maneuver. So we hold the checklist there. The next I'm going to call is 2,000 to go, or 2 to go, and 1 to go. And what will you do then?
So we can start reducing rates of descent. We can start stowing the speed brake just to kind of taper off that rate of descent, start reducing our speed so that it's a much more gentle level off as we approach that. And it's just the enhancing our situation awareness. So we're both not heads down. It forces us to fly the airplane to make sure we are flying it. And then once we get down to 10,000 feet or below, we check, are we at 10,000 feet? And we look at the cabin altimeter, which on the 7.3 is on our overhead panel. And we just verify that, yes, indeed, the cabin altitude is below 10,000 feet, which means it's safe for us to come off oxygen. So, but we don't just assume, because, the surprise, startle, it's possible that humans can misread it. It's a very easy thing to misread potentially. So we have a sacrificial FO. So the FO comes off oxygen first, and then he or she will sit there for a little bit and go, yeah, how are you feeling? Are any signs of hypoxia? Tingly lips, funny fingers? Do you feel a little bit maybe lightheaded? If not, which they shouldn't do, captain will hand over control to the first officer. Captain will take their mask off, oxygen headphones come back on. Okay, take a breath. Where a bit of situation awareness update. Where are we? Are we going towards terrain? Is everything okay? Once we're happy, before we would then carry on with the checklist, the next step will most likely be to speak to the cabin crew, because they're all on oxygen. And for example, we would then do a call such as number 1 to the flight deck. That alerts the cabin crew that now it's safe for them to come off oxygen, because they'll be on oxygen too, and then speak to us.
Yeah.
Because as far as we don't know whether it's just a little, maybe the outflow valve is just blown open, or are we missing the whole roof? We have no idea at this stage. So we need to build a picture of what's happened.
Yep. And it's super important here to understand from the passenger point of view that when the emergency descent PA comes on, the cabin crew will just sit down and take the
Yeah.
closest oxygen
Yeah.
mask. And there's 4 oxygen masks to every row of
Correct.
3.
Correct.
So there's always an extra oxygen mask on each seat row or
Mm.
each seat compartment, basically.
Yeah.
And that is for this reason: children, obviously, that infants that could be sitting in the lap. This is also why you cannot have that many infants on each row, because there's
Correct.
not enough oxygen.
Correct.
But also a cabin crew will be able to just basically sit down in the lap of someone, bring
Yeah.
the oxygen mask on until they know that it's safe to come off.
Yeah. Totally.
And then they will continue with the procedure,
Yeah.
which is done to come out, verify. I mean, they will likely know if there's been like a huge hole in the back and we've lost passengers or people are hurt.
Yeah.
They will tell us once we have made this PA, when they come up number 1 to the flight deck, and we will then use that to put into our PIOC model, our decision-making model, to decide what do we do next. So if we have that, the example of the 787 that descend out of was it over the Indian Ocean that they descend down?
Correct. Yeah, they descended and they continued to Mumbai for a safe landing, which tells you that there's probably no injuries. The aircraft in the airframe was fine. They had the fuel to carry on flying at low level to Mumbai. They did all their information gathering, predicted it into the future, and decided actually, yeah, why not? There's no reason not to keep going.
Yeah.
So
if you're over the sea, you're going to have to go somewhere anyway. So but that's how we will then, like, okay, we have a couple of really severely hurt passengers in the back, or people are bleeding from their ears because they had a cold and they burst their eardrums when this happened. Things like this can happen. Well, then maybe we will do a diversion to get medical support earlier. But if none of that, and we have fuel and it works, we might consider to continue. But it's all about step by step doing things in the right order to assure the safety of the aircraft at every given single point.
Yeah. So next time you see death plunge from 35,000 feet, take that with a pinch of salt, and don't worry about it. The other thing I might just before we finish up is people might go, "What about lowering the landing gear? That can help, surely." And it is doable. You can lower the landing gear during the emergency descent because that'll increase your drag. The only thing with that is we have to slow down often to get the speed below our maximum gear extension speed. So whereas we want to accelerate often to increase our rate of descent, to get the gear down, we have to slow down first, which is something we don't want to do, to get the gear down, and then we can pitch down with the gear. It's an option. Different operators might have different procedures. So it'd be interesting to know if anyone has a different procedure, with regards to getting gear down.
Because this is another thing that is just not obvious to people, and that is, while the aircraft might be structurally okay to fly at maximum speed with the gear extended, it's not for the extension, right? For the actual dropping of the gear and especially retraction of the gear, you have to be really careful with your speeds.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of things that we have to keep in mind before you do that. That's, for example, if someone, this used to happen back in the day, especially on the actually now with the Max, I guess it's a bigger problem, that people would be dropping the gear instead of putting it to neutral, like it used to be on the 737 NG. There's 3 positions of the gear lever. It's up, off, and down.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful when you do the after takeoff checklist, you're supposed to bring the gear lever from up to off, because you then take away the hydraulics from the system. Now, if you're a little bit sloppy there or did it too quick, you could end up just inadvertently putting it down instead. And if that happens, as a captain, you'd have to be very careful, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to, because it's too late. You cannot control the fact that it's not going out. But if you just go over there and, no, take it up again, the speed might actually be higher than the maximum retraction speed.
Yeah.
So you might have to leave it, let it get fully extended, wait, look at the speed, reduce the speed, and then take it back up.
That's it. Yeah. I've had students do it before. It happens. But you're exactly right. It's exactly what you have to do. But it'd be interesting to know from you guys, have you guys been in an aircraft in the back and you felt that you're going down super quick, or you felt the vibration? Was there anything that kind of stood out to you? Any traumatic descents that you've experienced? Let us know in the comments. I'd love to know any kind of feedback from you guys. What you've experienced.
Maybe you've even been in an emergency descent.
Yeah.
There's probably someone out there who has, and let us know about your experience.
Yeah, we can talk about it next time.
Now, the next thing that we wanted to cover in this the podcast is actually something that can cause an emergency descent, and that is like pieces falling off aircraft. Because there's been some reports in the press about that as well, and of course that could be something that could cause a puncture of the
Absolutely.
of the aircraft and cause an emergency descent.
Yeah.
So we're gonna talk more about that after this. Welcome back. So things falling off aircraft. That sounds like something that definitely should not happen, right?
Yeah, yeah. It shouldn't be happening. Aircraft shedding parts. Now, I've noticed a few of these in the press recently. I did a little bit of research on it, and it's a well known thing that bits do fall off aircraft. There was a recent event actually that happened, which I'll talk about in a moment. But I mean, Airbus are actually investigating. They've got an acronym for it. Of course, they do. You know, we
Of course
aircraft
they
don't
do.
fly without acronyms. No, they call it PDA, which maybe fairly simply just means parts departing aircraft. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
straightforward.
yeah, it's easy. But yeah, there's been bits in the news. There was one that actually happened yesterday or the day before. Sorry, the 2nd of July. Delta Airlines 737-900, which was flight DL3247 from Atlanta to Raleigh, Durham, and it lost a part of its trailing edge flaps on
I saw that.
approach. You saw that, yeah, and landed in someone's driveway. Now, there's various ones we can talk about. There's various types of issues with this. But the ultimate outcome here is that every single time this has happened, generally the aircraft has landed safely. Like that aircraft, the crew, I don't think even realised it had happened. It wasn't until they did the walk around and realised that part of the flap was missing, and someone called in and said, "Look, something's just fallen out of the sky and is on my driveway." But what it does show is how resilient the aircraft are. That this kind of thing can happen. Like we can lose a flap, which is far from ideal. But yet the flight crew didn't really even notice that it even happened.
No, but the question obviously now it sounds like this is the most common thing in the world. I have, to
Yeah,
my knowledge, in my 21 years of
no,
flying, never lost a part of my
no,
aircraft.
me neither.
So
Me neither.
we're talking about again something that's statistically extremely
Yeah,
rare,
yeah,
but with the thousands of flights happening, I mean, what I've seen the most of is tires falling.
yeah,
Right, that seems to be the one thing that happens more than other parts.
yeah.
And I remember, I think it was the Q400, the Dash
Yeah,
Q400,
yeah,
the Bombardier, yeah, that had some issues with a bearing in one of the landing gears that could, under certain circumstances, either just get stuck or break through its containment,
yeah.
and it caused basically after takeoff. There's videos of this of passengers that have been filming. You just see something glowing inside of the gear, you know, the spinning part, and then you see the tire just like fall off.
Done. Yeah,
Done. So that was a known issue that they have sorted out, that they have fixed, but it caused a few of these tires falling off. But there's also been other cases of tires falling off and
yeah. There's some
landing
big
on
ones
cars.
actually. There was a 777 coming out of San Francisco that was going to Osaka in Japan that lost a tire literally as it got airborne, and which thankfully caused no issue to the aircraft, but could potentially be quite dangerous. It actually landed and rolled into a parking lot, and there's some pictures of that of cars crushed from this 777 wheel that had come off.
Of course, that would kill someone instantly if they get hit by it immediately. Like, so this is not something to just laugh over. But it's interesting to know as well that when it comes to tires, either deflating or exploding or falling off, there's a reason why we have several of them.
Yeah,
Especially on the main gear. Even the 737 has two on each side of the main gear.
yeah.
Larger long-haul aircraft tends to have bogies with several wheel pairs on them. And again, redundancy, right? So the problem is that we sometimes won't even know that this has happened. Like there's no indicator that we've lost a tire.
No.
You'd think that there would be because you can get it on your car.
You
But
do, yeah. Maybe the 777 does. I don't know, but we certainly don't.
no, we would get reports. Either we would feel something on the takeoff roll, so you feel like a bump, and then
Yeah.
maybe some vibrations, which can be quite tricky. Actually, it's one of those things that it's easy to mistake for an engine failure,
It is.
and it's not one of those things that we should reject for
No,
above 80 knots.
no.
So a tire failure at like 120 knots is one of those things that they can throw in on a command upgrade sim
Yeah,
to to like
yeah,
see whether or not people are just like quickly rejecting rather than taking a second to do we have any indications here?
yeah.
But that would be an indication of something potentially. And then if obviously if air traffic control comes in and says, listen, we've found a tire or pieces of tire on the runway or whatever,
Yeah.
then we can assume it. But what kind of procedures would you follow if you knew that that was the case?
Yeah, so if we've established, say we felt a bit of a rumble, and that, like you said, it can really feel like an engine failure, particularly from a simulator perspective, because you might get a bit of a thud, a bit of vibration, maybe even a bit of yaw because you've got some extra drag now. But a quick look at your engine instruments should tell you everything's okay. You keep going. Got a decision now. Do we raise the gear? Do we leave it down if you know before you raise the gear? So that's something you're going to have to think about. There's no definite right or wrong answer on that one, but you can certainly argue it could be safer to leave the gear down until you've established what's gone on. And then it's a matter of building a picture, because we might have suspected it, but you've got to gather information, talk to air traffic. Did you find any debris? Is it one tire? Is it two tires? Is it a nose wheel tire? Is it a main gear tire? All of this is going to have an effect on how we land the aircraft. And then it's just a matter now of deciding what do we do? Do we keep going with this? Do we divert and land? And I think it depends on how much damage, because when you've got go on.
Yeah, because this is again, it's one of those things that it might look simple on the outset, but it's not. Right? First of all, people will ask now, why wouldn't you reject if you have a blown tire?
Very well.
But obviously, we have brakes connected to all of our main gear tires, and if we reject with one of the tires blown up, we're just not going to have the same braking action as we would be. So our V1 decision speeds might not be correct now. We might not be able to stop within the available runway distance, and there's no problem with bringing a broken tire up in the air. The only thing that we will have is when we get back potentially and land again, we will now have the entire runway distance available to stop. So it is one of those things, right?
Yeah.
The other thing is, what do you mean not retracting the gear? And the thing here is you might, like, if a tire blows, for example, it's gonna. Have you been driving down the highway and sometimes come across these like pieces of tire that some truck has left behind, and it's full of threads and stuff sticking out, and it's all over.
Yeah.
We can have the same on an aircraft, and if thread is sticking out and it's still spinning as it enters into the wheel well bay. If you've ever looked inside of a wheel well bay on a 737, you'll notice that all of our hydraulics are in there, right? All of the hydraulic components, pumps, lining, everything. So if you have a spinning thread, metal thread coming into that, you can cause some real secondary damage, which is why we have a really little nifty thing on the outside of the wheel. It's a tiny little hydraulic fuse.
Yes.
A tiny little nubbin that sticks out. That is designed to, if you are retracting a gear with spinning thread, it is designed to impact that spinning thread, brake, that releases the hydraulic fluid from the retraction mechanism.
Yeah.
And actually just makes it free fall back out again.
Yeah.
But it's not foolproof.
It's not foolproof, no. And the brakes could also potentially, they should stop it as well. But also there's a potential that, again, that should prevent it. But if the gear is now deformed and you raise it up into the gear, you might not be able to get it back down again. It could get jammed. There's these things here. But I noticed in both of them that happened recently, the aircraft diverted to a nearby airport. And that, now I don't know the full story, so I'm certainly not criticizing or passing judgment here. But from looking at it from a paper perspective, we want to land when we've got degraded braking and degraded tires. I want to land as slow and as light as I possibly can. So there is a potential argument that if you can get the gear up safely and you know there's no damage to the aircraft, or you're happy there's no damage because no other warning systems or anything else have gone on, to keep going to destination is a potential option, but only if you're absolutely sure that it was simply a tire blowout and there's no other damage, which can be difficult to ascertain, particularly if you don't have cameras around the aircraft, which a lot of long-haul aircraft do. So by flying all the way for 10 hours, burning off all the fuel, landing super light, makes the landing on reduced tires safer, potentially. But you can also dump fuel. So that's what they decided to do. And you can certainly argue that safety either way. There's no definite right or wrong answer there. But there's certain techniques we would use to land an aircraft with a damaged gear, whether it's nose gear, main gear, would determine how we actually land the aircraft.
Yeah, and when you say we can dump fuel, you mean they can dump fuel because
Yeah, we can't dump fuel.
short haul like 737 and Airbus A320s, we cannot.
We cannot do that. We're stuck with what we've got. So if we're getting airborne out of London, going down to the Canary, 4 or 5 hours, we've got 18, 20 tons of fuel on board. We're stuck with that fuel. We've got to burn it off or land overweight, which we don't want to do with a tire that's blown. So that's why with something like a 7.3, if we're going to fly for hours to burn off the fuel, sometimes you may as well just keep going to destination if it's a suitable airport, rather than circling around for hours. But yeah, there's certainly lots of things in play. But it's interesting how you'd land. You'd expect if it was a main gear tire that had burst, we have to anticipate how the aircraft is going to handle once we land. So if you think about, Petter was mentioning there that you've got reduced braking. So on the 7.3, we've got 2 main wheels on each side, each one with their own very powerful brake. So if you land and apply quite a lot of braking, the left wheels are going to be braking more than the right side with the damaged tire, which is going to effectively potentially yaw the aircraft in the side of the good wheels, because it's going to be biting more. There's more braking on that left side. Whereas if you've got very light braking, which is probably what you'd decide to do if you had a nice long runway, you'd probably find maybe a yaw towards the poorly tire because it's got more drag. It might be flapping around on the ground and there's a bit more drag. But it's great to kind of anticipate that, and whether you land slightly one side of a centerline or another, depending on how you're going to brake. And similarly with a nose gear, if you found out that it was a smaller tire, it was one of your nose gears, land in the center, very lightly lower, that fly the nose wheel on. We wouldn't let it plonk down on the runway, just fly the nose wheel onto the runway. Minimal braking to prevent that kind of pitch down and the extra weight on the nose. So try and find a nice long runway into a headwind, minimal braking, let it just roll to a stop. So there's different ways that we would manage that.
Yeah. Obviously, we would, if we did know it, we would have emergency services standing by and follow us, and everything as a precaution, which is also something that we would brief the cabin crew and the passengers about. So there's as always, there's a big chain of things that needs to be taken into consideration during the takeoff roll. Obviously, you have no time. This is no time available decision making, which is based on experience and knowledge, training. Once you're airborne and you're up, now you can apply the time available decision making, which is this Piozzi model that I keep jamming on about in all of my videos, which is super helpful to organize your thinking around this and to invite your crew members to get as much information as you can out of your crew. Which is something that you out there you can utilize and in any type of situation. This is not only aviation. This is business life. This is anything where you have time available and there's a multitude of different potential outcomes. It is always worth sitting down and really honestly, like, what is the problem we are facing? What are we trying to achieve? What is the best possible outcome? What type of information do we have? If we don't have information on something, maybe it's time now to gather that information.
And it's using that structured decision making. It's been proven to just generate better decisions. And whether it's aviation or in general business life, family, whatever it might be, it can really enhance it. And the beauty of a beauty of like a tire failure, or beauty is not the wrong word. The positive of a tire problem is that you have plenty of time, because we're trying to reduce our landing weight. So we have plenty of time to build a picture of what's happened and use these structured decision making processes. And when they're used properly, it's a massive tool. Such a tool to use. It's such a powerful tool, but only when it's used properly. And you have to understand how to use it properly, but it is a real tool when it's used properly.
Absolutely. And I mean, we were mentioning now, this not only tires, you said trailing edge flaps parts. And obviously, all of these things can have different impacts. Most of the time, things falls off aircraft. It's things like latches, things like little hatches for inspections, or maybe the ground power receptacle or something like that. It's obviously not good, but they don't really have an impact on how the aircraft is flown. Or the only thing is that if it's forward of the engines, obviously it can be sucked into the engines, and it can also, if it's a larger thing, go on and hits the vertical and horizontal stabilizer and cause damages there. But generally speaking, the aircrafts are incredibly robust.
Incredibly. Yeah. These little things, there's pictures of little hatches that have flown off and hit horizontal stabilizers, and there's a chunk missing, but they have no effect on the aircraft, thankfully. And every time these things happen, the industry learns from it. There was an incident with an Airbus, and there was a problem with a few of these little water servicing hatches on the fuselage that they kept coming off. and they found it was just metal fatigue on one of the latches, where it was just vibrating in the wind a little bit, and it just wore itself out, and they just break off. So Airbus redesigned the latch, problem goes away. So every time these things happen, it gets safer, it gets better, and taking it to the extreme with things coming off aircraft. Do you remember there was that military? I think it was an F-15 that had a mid-air collision and lost a wing, a whole wing, and yet it managed to still land safely. I mean that
that wouldn't happen with one of our aircraft.
No.
That's for sure. Like you lose a wing, that's about
it's
it.
kind of game over. But that was pretty impressive. I think it's on YouTube. You can probably find it if you search for it. But it's an interesting one. That one.
It's one of those things that we hope not happen. I mean, there was also, now that I think about it, things falling off aircraft. Remember the incidents with toilet ice?
Oh yeah.
I can't remember which aircraft type it was now. It might have been the 7.5 or the 7.6 that had issues with like the blue water from the toilet
That's right.
leaking.
Yeah.
So it was leaking out through the drainage mast or something.
Yes.
And the problem obviously is that at altitude, if you have that leakage, it's minus 60 degrees out there generally. So it just forms icicles, disgusting blue icicles. And as you then descend into warmer air, those icicles would just start to melt and eventually break off.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of damage to buildings, to rooftops and things like that on the approach into major airports, where this toilet ice would fall down with
this giant stinky bit of hail came down on someone's building. Yeah.
I remember that. But that was also one of those things that they sorted out when it started to become a problem. But I do think that it actually caused both property damage, but I think someone got hurt as well.
Oh, really?
I'm not like I seem to remember that, but I don't have it. I don't have it 100%.
Okay.
Now, Ben, as always, that's an hour. We could keep talking about this forever.
Yeah.
But this time we also have to take some questions from the audience, because we do read all of the comments that you guys send in. We love seeing it, both here on the YouTube channel, obviously, but wherever you send in these questions. Our Patreon crew, they get to preview these videos and listen to them, so we get a lot of questions from them as well, and we really, really appreciate it. So let's see if I can find some questions here for you to tackle. All right, so John Edward 7473, regarding the decision for turning back or diverting in international airspace, would the visa or migration situation for passengers come into play?
Unless we were very aware that there was an issue with that, then no, it wouldn't. I'd have no idea the visa status of the passengers behind me. So I wouldn't, unless we were informed that they had to go. But what about you? Any thoughts?
So I know, generally speaking, you wouldn't necessarily need to take them air or ground side. Like you could keep the passengers airside, which means that they don't have to go through immigration if you intend to get an aircraft to fly it out. Now there are some exceptions to this. I know, for example, Iran is a bigger issue. So you don't want to divert into Iran if you can avoid it, because we've had issues with passengers, but also the aircraft being stuck there, not being able to depart again.
Yeah.
So there are some of these considerations to take into account. We fly mostly within Europe, which means it's not an issue. But if you fly internationally, I do think that maybe you need to talk to operations to make sure that they have, because they definitely know all of the people on board and their status. But it's not something. It would not be the top of my list of priorities if I'm in a situation like that.
No, good question.
Yes. So Paulissimuncus 190 is asking, can during turbulence wings start to resonate, flex more and more until they break?
Good question. I mean, as we mentioned before, they're designed to resonate is a very high frequency resonation, which is something that you wouldn't get in turbulence. So the short answer to that is no, and if it's never happened. But the wings they get their strength from their ability to flex. So when you're looking out the wing and a window and you see the wing bouncing up and down, and you can see the wing wobbling around on the wing, the engine wobbling around on the wing, that's exactly what it's designed to do. And that's what gives it its strength. And they're designed so that metal fatigue does not set in when they're moving in that plane or that orientation.
Yeah.
But resonation is anything you'd add to that, Petter?
No, I mean, there is something that's very well known. It's an aerodynamic feature called flutter.
Yeah.
which is really dangerous, right?
Yeah.
That is a type of resonation, I would say. That's
I
a
suppose
type
it is
of
actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can, when an aircraft is being constructed, there is a risk if the control surface or the wing is not constructed properly, that it could go into a self
Very
movement that
true.
can become stronger and stronger until it
Yes.
eventually breaks.
Yes.
That is flutter, and flutter is one of those things that is that they test for in any type of, so like during the flight testing of the aircraft, flutter tests forms part of this, and it needs to a wing or a stabilizer needs to be able to not get into that, even with deposits, as in like ice
Nice.
and things on it. So they test this a lot. So
Yes.
the answer to your question would say is no, it should not happen unless there's a structural integrity issue
Yeah.
with the wing, as in like you hit something, like
And it set something up.
and it
Yeah.
set something off.
Yeah. But yeah.
And the last question then. This is actually a really, really long comment from Danny Balekter, 7936, which is a great name, by the way. And I'll take the second part here. Unrelated, sort of. Did you see the NTSB hearing on Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 with the door plug separation? I watched it, and it was really interesting. One of the things I had never thought of, which the NTSB brought up, was child safety restraint. I've never flown with a child in my care, so I just had not considered it before. But they brought up the dangers of having children under 2 just sitting in a person's lap when an incident like 1282 happened, or severe turbulence. What are your thoughts?
Okay. That's a good question from Dan. So the question there is the danger of being having a child on your lap strapped to you, and then you're bouncing up and down in. Am I
Potentially, but I
interpreting
think
that right?
in this particular case, obviously, it had to do with the door, popping off,
Blowing
and
off.
you're having a child in your lap, and the child potentially being ejected. Then,
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if they've got the seatbelts on, then obviously you're likely to. They're going to, if you're on the seat, they're going to be on the seat with you. So as long as they're strapped to you, which they should be with the seatbelt on, then that should be fine. But obviously, without a seatbelt, then yeah, there's no way that's going to work. But yeah, if it's under 2, it's just a standard procedure, isn't it, to have a child on your lap? And that's because I just don't. They're too small for a. You need that little bit. They're just too small for a seatbelt to work on them. You
yeah.
wouldn't have them in a car, would you, with an adult seatbelt? You need a child car seat, which obviously we don't have in an aeroplane. So I think, and it's been tested from what I remember, the crash test dummies that they've done and so on with airliners, having a baby kind of with the mother or the father with a seatbelt has seemed to be the safest way. But I stand to be corrected on that.
See, I am on the opinion that we should probably allow the car seats, the insets, and have them because they are by far safer. But the problem obviously becomes evacuation. So you'd have to
Yeah,
have specific seats then where you can
you
have
would.
a toddler seat on that doesn't obstruct other passengers from evacuation, for
Yeah,
example. But there's no question that if you're sitting in with a toddler, you should have your seatbelt loosely fastened, and they should have it as well. Now,
yeah,
the reality, I have flown with
yeah,
toddlers, and they don't really like being stuck in a seatbelt for a 2.5 3 hour flight. So it is hard. But then again, I mean, the NTSB took this up. I get it. It is a risk, but you can't really. I mean, it would be the same risk for an adult that is walking by at that particular second when
it's
that
true.
door plug. The thing here is that doors should not blow off aircraft. That's it. Whenever you have a door suddenly blowing off an aircraft, there's a risk to life and limb.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
this, who might get pushed out or whatever is a little bit mute.
yeah.
Don't build
Even
aircraft.
people in entire seats with their seatbelts still fastened have gone out of a panel. So when it gets that extreme, seatbelts or no seatbelts, it's incredibly risky.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. So
but
yeah,
if it,
I get the point, and yes, they are right. Just
yeah,
but the point here is going to have to be that this should not ever
no,
happen.
no,
So basically, on that, I think that we're done for today. Do you have anything to add, Ben?
no, that was fun. No, awesome. So yeah,
Right.
yeah. Thanks for all the questions, everybody. Keep the comments coming because we do look at them and we will go through them in the next podcast.
Absolutely. Have an absolutely fantastic day wherever you are, and we'll see you next time.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.